guys, we've got a special episode today. We have Tom Cronin in the house. Tom is not just a meditation master, but a true transformer of lives. He's got a remarkable journey that we're going to get in today. It took him 26-year career in finance, where he was battling stress, anxiety, and severe insomnia. And a lot of you guys DM us and ask us questions on stress, anxiety, and insomnia. So we're going to get into that today with Tom. But not only that, he's an accomplished author. He's wrote 6 books, transformation coach, a speaker, and the producer of the film The Portal. His commitment to reducing stress and chaos in people's lives is evident in his work, including the creation of the Stillness Project. Tom's approach is not just about achieving stillness and calm, but about igniting a successful spiritual business, awakening your inner leader, and unlocking your creativity. So today we're going to dive into Tom's journey, his teachings, and how he's helping people around the world to find their inner peace and purpose. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired by the incredible Tom Cronin. Tom, thank you for being on the HDL podcast.
Yeah, it's great to finally be here. Thanks for inviting me along today.
Awesome. I want to kind of, Tom, if you don't mind, get into the beginning of your journey. So you started with a career in finance. What did that look like? I mean, were you always looking for going into that? Was like getting rich, having the Rolex, the Ferrari, was that the thing? What started the whole idea of looking at, money and finance?
It's amazing how our life can take these turns, which we really don't expect sometimes. I actually had been backpacking around the world. It's a real rite of passage in Australia. We're so far away from the rest of the world that quite often would happen at the end of school. We would then go and, before university, take what's called a gap year. And it was a big part of my family tradition where we all took a gap year, which was to go and explore the world, mature a bit, get a bit more clear about where we want to go in life and have that worldly experience and then go into university. It's a long stint, 12 years of school, and then going straight into another 3, 4, 5 years of university. So it was a big tradition here in Australia, but definitely in my family to take that gap year. So I saved up a bit of money picking fruit and mowing lawns, then went and traveled around the world in that year off. And in that time, I was listening to Susie and the Banshees and the Smiths and reading existential books by Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, and was really starting to envision myself to be a thought leader and to be a writer as a journalist and write articles against capitalistic greed and save the world from the terrible things that were going on. And I was very idealistic in my mind as an 18-year-old kid traveling the world. But I had a very strong sense of, at that time, right and wrong, and was very much wanting to, see how I could make a difference in the world. And I was supposed to come back and do a degree in journalism at a local university here and become, ideally a top writer on these subjects. But I had a few months to fill in, so I just applied to a bunch of jobs in the paper. Before long, I landed on a trading room floor. And this was 1987. It was the same year that Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, was starting his career. And it was the wild, wild west. If anyone's seen Wolf of Wall Street, the movie, that was very much what my career was like when I first started. It wasn't a career. It was like, hey, I've got 3 months to fill in. Let's make some money. And it was crazy times. And before long, I just got swept along by that excitement, that fervor. And I didn't plan on that. I didn't expect that. I didn't even want to go into that industry. I didn't even know that it existed. But I just landed this job, and then before long, I was swept into that culture, and I was there for 26 years.
So do you feel like you're listening to the Smiths, you're downloading, obviously, some types of teachings and stuff like that. Do you feel like that time frame before you got swept into finance in that soulless part, do you feel like you were able to, was that your enlightenment time? Was it before that, or were you beginning to kind of see, like what consciousness was?
Not at all. At that point, I had a very strong religious upbringing. I was brought up under a very sort of Catholic family on a farm. We go to mass every week and had a very strong sense of faith and a strong sense of God as a child. I remember I prayed a lot and I had a strong sense that there was something or some intelligence. At the time, I thought it was God with a beard, but I realized later on in my spiritual awakening that it was more of an intelligence. This is sort of a consciousness that was like a call and response type setup where I would pray, and then there would be these incredible things that would happen in my life on the back of my prayer when I was a young kid. And that developed a really strong sense of faith and understanding that there was something else here in the world. But when I was in my 20s, prior, or even my teens, prior to going onto this trading room floor and traveling the world with the Smiths and Albert Camus and French existentialism, there was a sense of, at that time, almost angst and anger and frustration. And it was a little bit sort of dark, I guess, in some way, which I think a lot of teenagers go through. And that kind of, when I went into the finance industry and got caught up in the drugs and the drinking and the hedonism and the narcissism that came in that culture, I think that just kind of put a match under a rocket fuel that was about to ignite, and that sort of really led me down into sort of a deeper darkness. And it was almost like, it's darkest before dawn, they would say, using that sort of metaphor. And I think my dawning that would happen in my late 20s, early 30s, was preceded by a really bleak and dark time, which was accentuated in the finance industry.
Yeah, I use the word anger, and I really like that because that's what's happening now. And maybe that's just where we're at in our 20s, when somebody hits, teens, 20s. But you see this right now, and we have a lot of millennials that listen to this channel, and Gen Zs. What was... you fueled it, you said, with alcohol and money and finance. Were you using that to kind of cover up the anger? Was there always that anger there? What was that? And was it tied in with anxiety? Because I'm trying to correlate it to now what's happening with the youth. You go on TikTok and there's just so much mental health.
Yeah, I think we're in the darkest before dawn stage of our evolution as a species, which I'm really excited about. I think when I look at my trajectory, you're an infant, and that would let's just say our infantile days as a species, going back, tens of thousands of years. And then we've gone through our sort of teenage, chaotic, rebellious time, which was the last sort of, few hundred years. And now we're going through a really interesting, almost like our most bleakest time. It's the time where we have most conflict. It's the time where we're most addicted to pleasure. It's the time where we're most disconnected, I think, as a species. And I think that this is a prelude to a really big awakening that we're seeing the early stages of, where we start to realize our full potential and we realize our interconnectedness, and things really start to become more harmonious, more healthy, more happy, more abundant, more equanimous, and more integrated when we go through that transition and realize our true nature. And for me, there was that anxiety, and that anger is really just a sense of disconnect. And it's a disconnect to not just other, but disconnect to our true nature, our true spiritual essence. And when I started to connect to that, and that was a experiential thing, not an intellectual thing, and we can't make this cerebral. So listening to this podcast doesn't give you an experience of interconnectedness. The interconnectedness, not just with other, like I said, not just to the planet, not to the universe, but to your higher self, your spirit, your soul, your being, or God, as some would call it. That has to come through an experience, and that's where meditation played an integral role for me. Reading books and listening to the Smiths didn't actually alleviate my anxiety, my fear, or my anger. It actually just kind of almost exacerbated it. It was speaking to it. That's why I was drawn to it. And it wasn't until I transcended that through the meditation that things really started to change.
That's amazing, because there's a lot of people, I think, that's in that phase right now where they're seeking, and they may be listening to this podcast. They may be, watching the TikToks, the Instagrams. You're kind of seeing this spiritual awakening. We're seeing more and more, of information being put out there. But it's like the knowledge and the information that you're acquiring kind of, like you said, brings light to it. But there's nothing that was done about it. So you're just constantly just gaining more and more information, constantly aware of what is happening inside of you. Now, you alluded to the higher self. With meditation, higher self, I kind of want to get into that. So we'll get into that. But did you meet a meditation teacher? Like, how did you start off from going from finance, making lots of money, here I am doing this Wild West, to starting meditation? Like, what was that period?
Yeah, it was a really interesting transition from one to the other. And what happened was, over many years, I developed a lot of addiction, and that led to a lot of particular lifestyle choices that weren't very sustainable and healthy. And the good thing with your body is that it has this incredible capacity to continuously try to guide you away from things that you're doing that it doesn't like and towards things that it does like. And so if we get hangovers, if we get, unpleasant come downs from drug taking, if we get bad health and bad mental health because of particular ways we're living our life, then the body says, hey, I don't like this. And it will give you these symptoms. And the symptoms like a red light on the dashboard that lets you know that there's a problem. And with a symptom, anxiety, depression, panic attacks, insomnia, these are all red lights on the dashboard with the body saying, can you try another option? Can you try doing something else than what you're currently doing? What we shouldn't be doing is trying to mask that symptom, and that's what a lot of the world is doing now, either with distraction, so let's just, go and get drunk, or let's go and scroll through our TikTok feed because maybe that will make the problem go away, or through pharmaceuticals. Let's just medicate our way out of this. And unfortunately, not to say to anyone to suddenly drop your medication, but the symptom that you're trying to mask with the medication is there to actually let you know there is a better way and there's something you're missing here to try and guide you. And I was getting those along the way, but I kept ignoring them. Now, the thing with your body is if we ignore the symptoms and that communication, that beautiful, intelligent design that's trying to guide us, if we ignore that, it won't actually give up on us. It will just turn up the volume. And this is what happened to me in 1996 when I was 20-something years old, 28, 29 years old. At that point in time, I had a full-blown nervous breakdown. And this is when we get to a particular point called a bifurcation point. It's a point of almost like things have to break through or break down at this point. You can't keep going on the same trajectory and doing the same thing and over again. You either break down and things just collapse, the relationship breaks down, your business breaks down, you as a whole break down, or you break through. And at that point in time, I was in a really bad way. I was seeing doctors, put on medication, seeing psychiatrists, in a full-blown nervous breakdown, developed agoraphobia, couldn't leave my house, couldn't go to work. I was having mental health leave. And I was watching TV, just checked out, and there was a documentary about a very successful property developer here. And part of that documentary, he talked about how he used meditation to help him reduce stress and be successful. And he used the word transcendental meditation. And it was like this light bulb moment for me. It was like, wow, that's what's missing in my life. And I now never heard of meditation at that point, never come across meditation. I mean, that's when I started my journey. I started doing a lot of research into meditation, different meditation styles and techniques. And when I learned transcendental meditation, it was a complete game changer for me. It was something that really changed the trajectory of my life. And it was the missing link that I had had in my life. And the missing link wasn't the meditation. The missing link was what I found through the meditation. And that's when everything started to change and I got more stable, more balanced, more calm, started sleeping better. My addictions went away. The anxiety, depression, and panic attacks went away. And over time, as I integrated this more and more into my life, I realized that I wanted to become a teacher and pass this on to the world. And that's when I left finance to do this full time.
Tom, that's an amazing story. And there's a lot of people that are listening to this that are there. Maybe they're, we saw with what happened, 2 years ago and people staying in their homes and not wanting to leave their homes and the mental health issues. I mean, you basically everything that you've experienced, the addiction, everything that you've gone through is where we're facing now, especially with the younger generation. And you're saying that you found for you, there was this cure, but then there's this other side where people's tried the meditation apps. They've done, they've tried it for a day or two. They sit there for 10 seconds and then, their mind races. And I kind of want to get, if you don't mind, because I know you have a 21-day meditation program that will lead people to, but let's start in that process. Like if somebody's out there and they're hurting and they were like you and they're sitting on the couch and they don't know what to do, what were kind of the first things that you started to do when you started learning about meditation?
Well, I guess the first step, which was a game changer for me, was, and at that time, there were no apps. There was no YouTube. This was 1996. So a lot of the younger people listening to this can't imagine that world that existed without those things. The availability of these things now and the broad range of opportunities you have with something like meditation. When I learned, there was just a Yellow Pages phone book, which was what you have as Google these days. And there would have been 10 different local organizations that you could go to. So it wasn't this thousands of different ways you could learn. So I did try all the different techniques. There was chakra clearing, and there was guided meditations and focus meditations, and, dream catchers and bongo drums and all sorts of interesting things. But it was not until I got this particular technique, which incorporated using a sound or primordial vibration that you repeat inside your head, that did all the work for me and took me deep. And it was very powerful and very science-based. And that was a game changer. So learning with someone in person, first and foremost, or a qualified meditation instructor, really firstly made a big difference. And then looking at the techniques, because not all techniques are the same. So if you want to go from New York to Boston, you can walk, you can ride a bike, you can get a Porsche, you can, get an Uber, you can get a train, you can get all sorts of different ways to get there. And they're all going to get you there in different ways. Some will take longer, some will be more comfortable, some will be easier. And that's what meditation is. What I recommend is checking out different techniques, the ones that work best for you. And there's going to be so many different ways you can do this, but I think that there are some that are definitely much easier than others. And I just focused and did one that I found the most effective for me. And that's why I teach it, because I find it's the most effective for my students. I wouldn't have left my career to choose to teach that one particular style. I call it Vedic meditation or transcendental meditation. I wouldn't have chosen that if it wasn't going to have an impact, a very tangible, quantifiable, measurable impact on people quite quickly. So checking the technique to see if it works for you and having some consistency and time with that, allowing it. Everyone wants a quick fix these days. If it doesn't work within 30 seconds, I don't want to use it. So give it some time to really show the impact that's going to have, and have some patience with that as well.
Do you feel like whenever, because I've heard of Vedic meditation, do you feel like whenever, and at this point, you're a teacher and a coach on this, is it possible for people to actually, no matter how anxiety ridden they are, no matter how much stress they have in their life, is it possible to quiet their mind?
I would say 99.999% of my students in that first weekend workshop or week workshop will have some degree of transcending, that is to go beyond the thought-filled mind into conscious awareness where there's no thoughts. Nearly every student of mine will experience that in the first few sessions. Now, what's important to understand as well is that that's not our goal, actually. It is something that can happen in your meditation where you'll quieten the mind. But our goal is actually to clear stress and allow a quietening of the nervous system and the body to start to recalibrate and reset itself. So my body healed itself and it recalibrated and reset itself because I was using a technique that allowed a quietening of the mind that would then activate the body to do what it does really well. So our goal is less about, can I get the mind still? It's more, have I got a tool that enables the recalibration, resetting of my body? It's very physiological.
Yeah, that makes sense, because there's so many people, they get stuck in I tried this for 30 seconds, I tried this, and I sit there, and it was absolutely terror. My mind was racing. So you're focused more on a mantra or more on a sound that allows that. And I imagine each person gets given from a teacher. Is that how you? Yeah, that's that how you do it?
Yeah, that's right. They'll get a mantra sound to repeat inside their head. And then what that does is that mantra does the work for you. It has a beautiful quality. It's a bit like soothing a baby's back when you're trying to let it fall asleep in a cot. And just that, it can't be too firm, can't be too gentle, but just that nice repetition, the consistent repetition of that sound is the thing that actually does all the work for you in the meditation. If you just try and still the mind or force the mind to not think, you're going to be really struggling to get any result out of that, because the mind doesn't want to focus on one thing. It doesn't want to be still. So using the mantra plays an integral part in that. Now, if you're in a monastery and you don't have Instagram and you don't have podcasts and you don't have emails, you don't have family, and you're basically in a monastery hall and you're meditating for 6 hours a day, it's a very different practice, and very good reason why you'd use a different practice. They would use more of a Vipassana style focus, concentration meditation, because they don't really have anything else distracting them. And so different practices for different environments.
And how long, because obviously you found this to be healing. So you went from stress, anxiety, addictions to this healing you. How long did that take, or how long have you seen with your students? If somebody decides I'm going to give this a try, this is what I'm going to do. When did they start seeing results, like as far as being able to know, like, oh, wow, I am healing?
Yeah.
That realization, when does that happen?
It's interesting. For some students, when I'm running the course, I run them on weekends. So there'll be 4 sessions over a weekend. In their 3rd or 2nd session, what I've seen very consistently and commonly is someone come out of their meditation and start crying. Okay. It's like, why? I don't know why I'm feeling very emotional. And what's happening there is
right.
the impact of that meditation, because we've quietened their mind, we've quietened the body. The body is now clearing some low frequency energies that have been trapped and stuck in the system that are causing the anomalies and the problems. Now the body's releasing it, saying that doesn't need to be in here. Let's get that out. We're raising the frequency, clearing out the low frequency, and the expulsion of that energy expresses itself, energy in motion, the emotion, through the physiology. And I'm just saying, well, that's a really healthy thing. What's happening here is that you're releasing some sadness that has been accumulated and stored in your body. So that can happen in the first weekend. But what we tend to find is and for me anyway, personally, I didn't have that emotional clearing happening. I had a lot of fear in my body, particularly as a child, a lot of anxiety. So there was some releasing of that during the first few days. But the biggest thing that I noticed within the first few days was that the fatigue was showing up. I was really tired because I'd turned off the cortisol pump and the adrenaline pump, which most of us have running in our system, which is why we have anxiety. Too much cortisol. And that's because of the lifestyle we're living. So the body shuts the cortisol pump, starts producing melatonin, which is the biochemical for sleep. And so I was sleeping like a log every time. It was phenomenal. I'd never come across that before. And I was feeling a lot of fatigue. And I just say to my students, the first week or 2, you might get a lot of fatigue. Sometimes it could go 3 weeks. And that's a really healthy thing. A lot of us don't like feeling fatigue, which is why we have double shot macchiatos and coffee and caffeine and cans of V and things like that to stimulate us, because we don't want to feel tired. But if we're tired, we should listen to that and get some sleep.
Yeah, that's amazing. You said something, and I want to hit on this because I've been noticing this, especially with younger men in their 20s. You're seeing a lot of anger, but it's really fear. And I've delved deep within myself and had so many realizations of just totally fear-based. I mean, if I had to say the number one thing I think that I've had to work on, especially with my shadow, is fear. So, and it's been masked as me being angry, me yelling, me ruining relationships. The list goes on and on. And you mentioned that too. Do you see that, like in your workshops and when you're teaching and coaching? How do you see fear being manifested? And do you especially see it in like younger men or men in general?
Yeah, fear's really primal. It's so deep in us, going back to our very ancient DNA, because of the fear of dying, the fear of losing, the fear of entrapment. All these things are fear-based, and that then, as you say, manifests in other ways, particularly in anger. And if you look at an angry army, they're afraid of losing. An angry sports team that channels that into aggression on the field because they're fear of losing. And what that means to them, if they lose, then that means they're less, and their identity is based upon being more. And so it's very primal, it's very deep. And why particularly transcending meditations are so powerful, just to firstly get to jump a long way ahead, is that enlightenment is the absence of fear. Enlightenment is the end result of someone that no longer has fear, because they are enlightened to their fundamental absolute reality, that they're not the individual that could lose. They're actually the field, and let's just call it the divine or source, which is the field of oneness. And you can't lose something that you are all of. You can't be beaten if you are the other. And so what's really interesting is that the meditation eventually leads us to fearlessness, because we've become realized in our true nature, which is that there's no fear component in our absolute nature, which is our divine quality. So fearlessness is a beautiful point to get to, and it's something that I'm working closer and closer towards, which is really exciting and beautiful at the same time. And what we see with the early stages of meditation is a lot of the freeing of the effects that fear is having on us. So for me, anxiety, lack of sleep, and then addiction, because when we have a lot of fear in our body, we have a lot of cortisol. And when we have a lot of cortisol, we don't have a lot of serotonin and oxytocin, which is the biochemicals for happiness and love. And because we don't have a lot of happiness and love, we need to go and use something that can hopefully elevate our life, which would be drinking, sex, gambling, drugs, or social media addiction. And so we're constantly looking for something that might make us feel better because we don't feel better already on our own, which is because we've got a lot of adrenaline, which is fear, and not oxytocin or serotonin. So it's very complex. But what we've got to get to the core of is, can we get the reduction and the reducing of the cortisol, the adrenaline, out of the sympathetic nervous system state? Whilst we're in that state, it's almost impossible to look at ways of reducing fear. That is the byproduct, getting them into the parasympathetic and getting them into the peace response in the body. And that's my first step in the process with the meditation.
Yeah, that's amazing, because, what you're saying right now, for some people that are listening to this, is like, this is amazing. This would be something that would be so awesome. It would change my life. But here I am, I can't sleep at night. I'm playing video games. I'm drinking alcohol, smoking, weed endlessly. There's this whole, no purpose, no vision, no nothing. And I know, and I want to get into this because you made a film, and you have people with ADD, ADHD and all that, but you made a film called The Portal. And I encourage people, it's free to watch, right?
That's right. Yeah. We're giving it away to the world. Yeah.
And it's a documentary, and there's an app also, but it's called The Portal. Can you go into like the core message, what you were hoping that through this medium of film, what you were hoping that, and I know you have a big vision of 1 billion people to meditate daily, but what was the purpose of the film, The Portal?
Yeah. Going back to, people you said that might be listening that, smoking weed and they're playing video games where they're killing people all the time, and they're maybe using other things to mask their fear or insomnia and all these anomalies. It's one thing to try and address those anomalies and those problems. Hey, don't do that. Stop doing that. Maybe you should do more of this. I find that it's kind of putting a Band-Aid on cancer. We're going to get to the underlying cause of why you're doing those things. And usually what's coming from that sort of deeper probe is a realization of a disconnect and a deep sense of lack of fulfillment. And all action is motivated in the quest to find fulfillment. And what I found was that when someone starts meditating, certainly what happened to me anyway, was that we start to tap into, rather than outcome-oriented fulfillment, where if I win that game, or if I can get on my phone, or if I can drink that drink or take those drugs, then maybe I'll get more fulfilled. But if we can flip that and go to a self-referred fulfillment, one that bubbles up and arises from within, and you tap into something that you didn't know was there because you weren't looking for it, you were looking outside. Now we're looking to go inside through our meditation journey, our inward journey. Then we start tapping into a deeper sense of fulfillment. I had one client who was a trader at a large investment bank who learned to meditate with me. And after a couple of weeks, he contacted me and he said, man, I feel like I've taken an ecstasy tab. Like I feel like I'm on a high. I said, what you've done is you've tapped into a self-referred state that is within you and always was within you. You just don't know how to connect into it. And so that connection. And so what I find is, rather than trying to stop people from doing these things because they're bad for them, if we can get them to connect to that part of themselves that is quite fulfilling, then they will the byproduct of that is that they will find that they're less drawn to those things anyway as a result of that. And that those things start to drop away. Those, negative behaviors or addictions start to just melt away. So I didn't go out of my way to stop drinking and taking drugs, or go out of my way to stop other addictions. What I found was that they started to naturally just drop away because I was producing more serotonin and oxytocin inside myself through my meditation experience. So the Portal film was motivated to inspire people to meditate, and the Stillness Project, because I could see that if people started meditating, particularly these deeper meditations, the byproduct of that is they don't become perfect. And I'm certainly not perfect. I'm still learning and growing and evolving, and still have daily challenges and things that come up. But you become better. You become better at living. You become better at relationships. You become better at work. you become better at creativity, and you become better at fulfillment itself. And I think that's an ongoing process, but having the tool in your toolbox to help you go through that transition is a really important thing.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really saw on your website and some of the things that you do is you work around spiritual business. And we have entrepreneurs and young entrepreneurs that are, listen to this show, and they'll share information with us like, how'd you start your podcast? How'd you get it successful? What do you do for social media marketing? And, we always want to find that little hack. And I think this can coordinate with meditation, but we're always looking for, give me that quick answer, give me that quick fix. Let me plug and play this real fast and see if it works. Where you've done meditation for years and years, you've also helped people in business and kind of, like as an entrepreneur, what does that look like when you bring, because people almost look at it as like there's big corporations, those are bad, hedge fund managers, evil, George Soros, all that stuff, and then here's the opposite of that, which is love and spirituality and humility, and we kind of, what is that bridge that you, and I know you have courses on this and teach this, what is that bridge between business and spirituality?
It's a really interesting world that we're entering into now. Very exciting time, because just in the last 5 years, maybe 10 is a bit of a stretch, we've just started to see a huge wave of people coming out of courses like breathwork trainings and meditation trainings and yoga teacher trainings and coach trainings and nutritionists and PTs. And we're seeing this whole wave of people now starting to want to make an impact in people's lives. We're seeing the way people learn things becoming much more niche and specific. So people will do a breathwork course, and people will do a meditation course or a yoga course. And so we're seeing people, look to have more inquiry to make their lives better, which didn't happen 50 years ago. People went to work and they came home and watched TV and then went to bed. Whereas these days, people are wanting to learn. They're wanting to go on retreats. They want to do training courses. They want to improve themselves. And we're seeing a lot more teachers suddenly coming off the pipeline, having been qualified and being able to supply that demand. And what I found was that, myself included, was a lot of us didn't have any idea how to set up a business and how to treat it as a business. A lot of us were treating it like a passion or something that was my purpose. And yet they just didn't know how to have a structure to that. They didn't know how, and I didn't either. And I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in mentors and guides and consultants and advisors trying to help me set up a business around that. But a lot of them were telling me to niche down and do one thing. And I found that model of advice that they were giving me wasn't really working well for the space that I was in. They applied to flipping houses or options trading or, trading Forex. But when it came to setting up a conscious-led business, it's a totally different model and it needs a different blueprint. And so then I created a blueprint called the Ascension Business Blueprint that I mentor a lot of conscious leaders on how to set that up into their business, which is a multi-layered, multi-dimensional business model that allows you to do lots of different things and have revenue coming in from different products at different times.
I love that. And we'll get into that specifically, but you mentioned something conscious-led. What does a conscious leader look like to you?
That's a good question. I like your questions. It's someone that has a deeper sense of awareness about the fundamentals of life, that we're out of what I call game A business models or game A way of living in the world, which is there's me and then there's other. And me can get something from other that is, me in extraction and commoditization mode. That's where the world is pretty much built, in a whole economic model of extraction and commoditization. So politics is extraction and commoditization. Business itself, banking, pharmaceuticals, all of that is built on, even farming, everything is extraction and commoditization. The problem with that model is it's very unsustainable and it comes with a high cost. And to the point where we might even see the extinction of a human species because of that extraction and commoditization, without a sense of awareness about the long-term implications of your actions and your extractions and your commoditizations. And for instance, a couple of examples would be, we don't value whales, but we value what we can extract from the whale. We don't value the ocean, we value what we can extract from the ocean. We don't value bees, We value the honey we can get from bees. We don't value trees. We value the 4x2 we can get from trees. And so that's the extraction and commoditization. Now, a conscious-led business is one that is awake to the fundamental absolute reality that they are part of a unified field, not as a concept, but as an experience. That other is actually an extension of me. And therefore, everything that I do must be in some way, shape, or form at the elevation and the support and the enhancement of other, because other is me. And so this is what we call a game B business, which means that my business in every aspect must leave a positive impact in every way, shape, or form, so that the products that I create must be supportive and enhance other people's lives. Philip Morris and tobacco, can we say that about that business? Most likely not. It's a win-lose paradigm. Someone wins, someone loses. And it's based on extraction and commoditization. So my products that I create must enhance and support.
So,
yep. Go on.
You said something and I thought it was amazing. You said the elevation of me. And I know when you're talking about me, as a spiritual leader, a conscious-led leader, you're talking about the higher self. So whenever you're coaching a business leader, and I know you're teaching in meditation and meditation practices, but what are some of the things about getting clear on me, getting clear on my higher self? What are some of the things that you're doing? Because you almost have to reprogram somebody. But I know you had to do this with yourself. If you spent 20 plus years in the finance industry, you had to reprogram yourself to say, this is what a business leader looks like. So what is that, that elevation of me? What does the higher self, the me, look like as a leader?
If you're talking about the me as in me, the leader, or as in the client that's working with me, the leader, which one of those two are you talking about?
No, I'm talking about me, the person in of himself, like if they're acting out in their higher self, the difference then from being egoic based, extraction model.
Yeah. So we have 4 layers of, four layers of our own reality. We have a physical layer, which is the dense mass that you can touch and feel. We have the emotions, which is the feelings that are experienced within the physical layer. So we've got feelings in the physical, and that's you're happy or you're sad or you're angry or you're fearful, whatever that feeling is that's currently being experienced within the physical body. We've got a mental layer, which is the thoughts that are operating within inside the mind, and that's the thinking mind. And each thought is a tangible, quantifiable, measurable layer of existence. But we've got this layer that most people don't really identify with yet, and that's because we're in a particular age where that hasn't been realized or connected into. And that's what I call the spiritual dimension. And that's a non-form, non-physical, non-quantifiable, measurable reality. And it's, for most people, not a reality yet because we're only identifying with physical, mental, and emotional, the dense layers of their existence. The spiritual layer is something that we need to start incorporating more of our awareness of through transcending practices. And there's other ways that we can access that. It could be maybe people get it through fasting or plant medicine or yoga. I find transcending meditation a very powerful way to get to an experience that I'm more than thoughts, feelings, or physicality. And when I transcend in meditation, I experience a reality that is an unmanifest, non-form experience that is still actually in some way identifiable. I exist even though I'm not thinking. I exist even though I don't have these feelings, and I exist even though I don't have a physical body. And people come out of their meditation and go, where did I just go? That was amazing. And I said, you've transcended the 3 layers that you identify with and experience this 4th layer, which is spirit or higher self. So we have a lower self, which are our vehicles, our physical, mental, and emotional bodies. And then we have a higher self, which is our non-form reality, which is beautiful quality of bliss, love, and joy. And so when we start to incorporate that with our 3 vehicles, higher and lower self coming into one, now we're having a fuller experience of the human dimension, the human reality. And then when we create businesses from that, that's more of a conscious-led business because we'll be more conscious of what our true truth is.
That's amazing. I mean, just imagine having a boss that's all about bliss, love, and joy. I mean, it's almost like I'm laughing because just to think about that, like that, most people that are listening to this now, if they have a boss, those three words are not coming out of their mouth: bliss, love, or joy. So if you're a leader and you have those three things and you're operating in that higher self, I could just imagine the business you could build.
Yeah, the businesses built from that place are very, very different businesses. And look, it doesn't have to be a business that's around meditation teaching. There's some amazing businesses in Australia. We've got a business called Canva, which I think is an amazing business. That's a Game B business model where the products they build, which is for graphic design and stuff. We've got Atlassian, another great business that is in the tech space. They're creating a great business that the products support society and make a better society as a whole. The business itself is a for-profit business, and they're generating sustainable business models that allow them longevity. But they're also channeling some of their success into other areas of the world that need their support. And so that's a win-win-win business model, which is what ours is as well. And so, yeah, businesses from conscious leaders that have become aware of this sort of spiritual aspect of bliss, love, and joy, they create very different businesses. And I think that that's how we're going to see a better world, because if we've got political parties coming from that place, businesses coming from that place, schools and pharmaceuticals coming from that place, then hopefully we see a lot less conflict in the world, a lot less turmoil and anger and fear, and a lot more of bliss, love, and joy being expressed not just through our businesses, but through the individuals that are creating the businesses as well. But I just want to say one thing, because it's really important we don't.
Do you see a few?
I just want to just touch on, because it's easy to get lost in the idealism of that. But we also got to incorporate the practicalities as well. And there's light and there's dark and there's shadow sides and all sorts of complexities and layers. So I just want people to understand as well that it's very utopian and idealistic to think that everything's just going to be love, peace, and mung beans. But there's a beautiful quote from Ram Dass that says, seek enlightenment and also pay your electricity bill. So there's these, practicalities as well that we need to look at. And there's some complexities in the world that it's not just as simple as that. There's a lot going on at the moment in the world with a lot of conflict and religions and geopolitical conflicts, that it's a very complex world that we're in. It's not just as simple as we would like it to be.
Now, when you look at like a business leader or somebody that comes to you and maybe they're doing one-on-one coaching with you or whatever it may be, and obviously they're seeing, maybe if they're working for a Philip Morris or whatever, they're like, well, my alignment's off. This isn't the business I should be in. Maybe I'm going to start a business. How do you align them with their higher purpose? Do you walk them through that? Like even there's young entrepreneurs that are listening right now that are saying, I want to start a business. I've tried this or that or this, what approach do you walk somebody through for them to understand how they can align with their higher purpose?
The first step I do is I take them out of their thinking mind, because the analytical mind will always be able to see pros and cons in everything, because everything has pros and cons. There's pros and cons in running a business like Philip Morris. So analytical mind will always be able to see the good and bad, the right and wrong, and they will almost be in equal portions in many respects. What I want to get them to is their heart. When we quieten the mind through meditation, what happens is there's another communication which is coming up, A, in the heart and B, in the gut. Those two are the areas of communication that guide us more accurately through life, but we generally don't listen to them because we've become a very cerebral society. We really dominate thinking over everything else in our life, and this is why we have so much conflict and turmoil and anxiety and anger, because we've really given so much emphasis to thinking. That's why we listen to podcasts. That's why nothing wrong with podcasts, because we can learn something from them, but everything is very cerebral. Okay. Now, what I want to do is quieten that mind through practices on a daily basis. And then what will happen is there's an arising within them that will be guiding them. And if I was listening to that more when I was younger, I wouldn't have done half the things that I've done, because I was so deep in, what will people think of me? What if I don't do something right? Mm-hmm. What if I don't have enough money? So we listen to our mind and we don't trust the gut and we don't trust the heart. And what I help them to tune into is that there's something guiding them which will move them in the direction that will create a very harmonious life. We're actually designed for harmony. We thrive in harmony. we thrive in peace. We thrive in quietness. And there's a beautiful approach to life where we can actually achieve more by doing less, and achieve more by doing what we love, and have a more successful life by listening to that heart space that's trying to guide us in decision making. And it can be even down to, what am I going to have for dinner tonight? To tune into that guidance system that's within inside of us.
Yeah, that's amazing. You mentioned the analytical mind. I had somebody tell me, they're like, Jason, you're focusing too much on the how, and that just hit me so hard, because you're right. It's like, especially as business leaders, you always want to focus on the how. You always want to ask those questions. It's just all mind. So do you believe that meditation is a way that you can get into and you mentioned gut, like the heart and the gut. And I know scientifically, what's going on there, but maybe you could explain it to the user. Whenever you're meditating or whenever you're making decisions off the higher self, what is happening when you're making a decision off the heart and the gut?
There's really subtle feelings that arise from within. A lot of us really struggle to trust them or hear them. Like I said, because we're hyper-stimulated. We're so stimulated and we're so conditioned and so coded. You talked before about reprogramming, which I really liked, because we've got to understand that we're actually deeply programmed. As a species, as a society, we're programmed to think that this is just very normal, that certainly in Australia, there's a pub on every corner where people walk into to get completely unconscious. We're programmed to think that it's normal. We just had a big racing carnival on the weekend. We're programmed to think it's normal that the money that we've worked really hard for that week, we're going to spend on getting really wasted while we watch some horses run around a track and beat themselves stupid, so that we can actually try to make some money, which we generally quite often, a lot of us will lose that money. And that's just normal part of the fabric of our society, because we're being programmed to think that that's normal. And we don't know what we don't know. So we don't know anything different than what we know. And so firstly, understanding that we're programmed, and that the way we speak, the things that we think are normal, the things that we do on a Saturday morning, the things that we do on a Friday night, a lot of that's just deeply coded and conditioned into us. Most of our religions are deeply coded and conditioned into us. So firstly, looking at the program, and then starting to liberate ourselves and maybe free ourselves from the constructs of that program, and tune into our heart and tune into that very subtle guidance system. So for me, what was normal would be to go out at 11 o'clock at night and start partying at a rave. But my body was screaming at me to say, I don't want to do that. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. That's going to put me into a more compounded anxiety-filled state. These days I can listen to my body. My body says, no, 9:30 at night, I want you to go to sleep. And then when the birds start chirping at 5:30 in the morning, my body's saying, no, I want you to get up now. And what arises within me is like, wow, I actually really feel like going to the gym, or I feel like going for a surf, or I feel like doing some yoga and then meditating. So these gentle communication systems are inside of us that can actually move us towards greater harmony, greater health, and greater happiness. But our society isn't coded and programmed to be that way. And so we don't listen to that intelligence within us. We listen to the code that was programmed into our mind.
I love that. We're coming up on the hour, so I want to go over the things that you offer, especially you have a meditation program, a 21-day meditation program. Can you talk to our audience in detail what that is, and kind of walk them through it, what they would experience if they decided to be a part of that?
Yeah, when I learned to become a meditation teacher, I was very excited and very passionate about bringing this technique into people's lives. And the way it's taught traditionally for thousands of years is you teach it in person, you have someone in front of you, and you sit with that person in your locality and take them through a program. And when the internet arrived, and I was very inspired by Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, he was teaching you that there's a very different world just emerging, that you could scale things and reach people around the world that you couldn't reach before. And this was something that was very new before the internet. You couldn't do that. The only way you could reach people in the world was through the magazine, the newspaper, the radio, or the TV, which meant you had to have a big budget to get some message across those 4 platforms that would somehow reach a wider audiences. Outside that, we didn't have TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and Vimeo. So it was a very exciting world when the internet arrived, because now our message could touch people like you're over in the other side of the world to me even right now. and people will be listening to this in all parts of the world at a different time than what it is right now. And that's really exciting. And so what happened to me was that I realized that I wanted to bring this technique into the world in a way that other people could access it that couldn't access me in my locality because of price or location. And so I created a program that would enable people to get a version of this technique from anywhere in the world. And I've had people, one woman was on an island north of Finland up near the Arctic Circle that was suffering from seasonal depression because she only got sunlight for 4 months a year, and postnatal depression because she'd had a child and she was struggling with postnatal depression. And she learned this technique by using my video program, and she sent me an email, said it completely changed her life. So it was really exciting that no matter where they are in the world, they could access it. So what they're getting is a 21-day program with me every day in a very intimate video, taking them through a process of teaching them how to meditate using this technique. And not only do they get the program itself, which is pre-recorded and self-paced learning, but they also get live Zoom calls with me every week with my community where we get to meditate together as a group. So that now with Zoom and platforms like this, we can bring communities together in real time and create a sense of congregation, which has always been something that has enabled things to stand the test of time, like churches because of congregation, yoga because of congregations, which is really exciting.
I love that. And what's the website that they can go to look at this 21-day?
We might put it under the show notes because it's quite a long website address. My website is tomcronin.com. But what we might do is I'll give you the link and they can access that underneath the show notes.
Yes, I'll put everything under the show notes. That'll be awesome. Your books and all that. Tom, this has been amazing. I do want to ask a fun question because I know us here in America, we always like to know information about Australia and everything. And I know you probably get asked this 100 times. You mentioned the word surf. So instantly here in America, even though we have Florida, which is like shark capital of the world, people don't realize that. But how do Australians deal with great whites and surfing?
We just know in our psychology that you're sharing space with other species. And it's just one of those things that you just know is there. So it's not even, sharks is one thing, for me, I'm on my parents' farm at the moment and it's in the bush. And I know when I go outside the front door that I'm constantly aware of funnel webs, which could kill me, brown snakes, which will kill me, redbacks, which will kill me. And then when I'm going into the ocean, I've got blue-ringed octopuses and I've got sharks. And I just know that life here is you're just mindful that you're walking and sharing space with other things that can particularly take your life away. And I guess it's like if you're going for a walk in the forest in America, you've got to be careful of the bears and things like that. But as surfers, it's so deep in my awareness that when I'm in the water, particularly if I'm out the back of a set, particularly on a more remote beach, there's trepidation there. You're very aware of your legs dangling beneath your surfboard when you're sitting waiting for a wave.
Right.
There's not much you can do about it. You just got to weigh up the pros and cons of.
Yeah, I could imagine that. I've always loved surfing, but that fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you live with it.
That's crazy. Well, Tom, thanks for being on Higher Density Living podcast. I really appreciate it. We'll make sure we got everything in the show notes. I encourage everyone to go to your website at tomcronin.com. Also on your Instagram, that's Tom Cronin too. Yeah. I really appreciate it. This has been super enlightening, and I know we're going to help a lot of people, Tom.
Yeah, it's great to share space, and thank you for inviting me along today. And thanks for listening, everyone, and being part of this. It's been great to be here with you.